Joining us now, as they are trying to frame it in that context, is Timothy Hale, January 6th defendant who had his conviction overturned. Timothy, welcome to the program. Timothy, tell us your story.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me on, Charlie. I appreciate the platform. I had a pretty egregious story, though unfortunately with January 6th, it's not the most egregious. I was actually incarcerated with dozens of other J6ers in the DC jail, what they call the DC gulag. And we were essentially deprived of our civil liberties for quite some time. On January 6th, as you alluded to in the introduction, I was working for the United States government, and I was also an internet comedian, and I was smeared as a domestic terrorist and a far-right extremist. I was denied bail. I was denied due process. I was denied access to religious services, basic medical care, and what have you. Everything you hold sacred in the Bill of Rights was deprived of me. But on January 6th, I was in a suit and tie. I went to the Ellipse to hear President Trump speak. I didn't even know there was going to be a protest at the Capitol. Upon going there, the Capitol Police and Metro PD attacked the crowd. They sprayed us through flashbangs into the body of the public, and body slammed old women and a myriad of other things. And the crowd reacted. There were agitators and provocateurs who were there to incite conflict with the police, and the police were more than happy to oblige. And so this is how January 6th escalated into a riot. It was not an insurrection. President Trump did not direct us to commit crimes. I walked into the Capitol building because I followed a crowd and the doors were open. 40 minutes later, the Capitol Police asked me to leave and I left. And so after that, I was hunted down by the FBI and NCIS, and I was sentenced to 4 years in prison, and I ended up doing 3 years on that bid. There's a lot to talk about with regard to January 6th, and I'm happy to answer any questions and elaborate.
How did your life change because of this, and go through the personal financial cost and difficulty that you had to go through because of it?
Well, I suppose the first most obvious thing is that inevitably I became a convict, though fortunately my conviction has now been vacated a few weeks ago. So there's that. Unfortunately, I had to serve 3 years in prison before that would happen. So my sentence was front loaded before I could actually get true justice. So the most obvious thing is that I was lied about, I was smeared, and I was denied due process. I was kept in captivity, and unfortunately, I was smeared. I worked for the United States government. I served my country honorably for 12 years. I served as an Army administrator. I worked for the United States military. I protected our country, and I was rewarded for this by being locked in solitary confinement for over a year. My health diminished. Fortunately, I had a strong mind, but I lost quite a bit. I didn't just lose my career, though. I lost my home. I had an apartment that's gone. But fortunately, most of the things I lost were material. But the things I am going to have the hardest time recovering is going to be my reputation. And well, I can't get those 3 years of my life back. Really, I can't get the last 4 years of my life back. And unfortunately, that's true for a lot of other defendants. And I'm not looking for pity because, as I said, I got off somewhat lucky compared to a lot of the men I was locked up with. They had families and I did not. So they didn't just lose business opportunities. They didn't just lose homes. Unfortunately, some of them lost their wives. And they've been kept from their children for many years. So I wanted to be driven home that January 6th was a humanitarian disaster. None of what they showed you on TV was true, but there are a lot of stories that need to be told about January 6th, and mine, unfortunately, is just the tip of the iceberg.
What do you think is the greatest thing we have yet to learn or discover regarding January the 6th?
I would say the sheer level of infiltration. The sheer level of infiltration. We know the names of several Antifa members who were there. We have reason to believe that there were hundreds, according to the confessions of some. But we also need to understand that there were plainclothes police officers there, Capitol Police and Metro PD, especially the electronic surveillance unit, You had undercover FBI agents who were there. I and others have identified them. We know their names. And there were Defense Intelligence Agency assets there that were there that day. There were people on satellite phones, and the government is covering this up. And I'm sure you saw the report recently where the government finally admitted in a report that, oh, there might have been 20 or so confidential human sources who were there. But most of them just happened to be there. They weren't working. That's nonsense. I'm sure the number is far higher. And when Donald Trump takes office and we finally secure the Department of Justice, the Department of Defense, the Department of Homeland Security, and all the other three-letter agencies, I think we're going to see that there was a staggering level of infiltration. And there were quite a few assets deployed there that day who were encouraging violence, who were encouraging breaches of the Capitol perimeter, and who were inciting the crowd to go inside the Capitol. And of course, those entities largely face no consequences.